Way back in the 1980s, secret government employees dug up famous guys and ladies and made them using genetic copies. Now the clones are sexy teens. Now they're gonna make it if they try. Loving, learning, sharing, judging. Time to laugh and shiver and cry. Don't hide, don't hide.
Greetings, true believers, and welcome to another episode of Dan Dashley Discusses, the weekly comic book review where I tell you if a book's worth buying, borrowing, or skipping. This week we've got something really exciting on the plate for you, one of my most anticipated books in a long while, Archie #1. For those of you who don't know, or who might be out of the loop, Archie Comics has for a while been trying to reinvent their image to stay relevant today. They've been coming out with books like Afterlife with Archie, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and letting Dark Horse publish Archie vs. Predator. Books pointed more towards a modern teenage audience. And this is their latest entry in trying to stay relevant, a reboot written by Mark Waid with art by Fiona Staples. And this reboot's actually rather important. This is the first Archie #1 in 75 years. One of the longest running comic traditions has been rebooted to #1, which means right out of the gate, this comic has some really high expectations to live up to. Luckily, Archie Comics has brought on two of the biggest names in comic books right now. On writing, we've got Mark Waid, Kingdom Come, an amazing Daredevil run. Mark Waid has been in the industry for years, has shown time and time again that he's one of the best writers in the business, and that makes him a great pick for Archie Comics to bring on for this new #1. Then we have Fiona Staples, certainly not as long of a career as Mark Waid, but a very high-profile artist at this time. She's with Brian K. Vaughan on Saga, pumping out some of the most beautiful covers that I've ever seen. And she's a rather talented colorist as well, having done a couple issues of one of my favorite comics, Proof. So Archie Comics is making sure that the reboot is in very good hands. So now let's answer the question that's the only reason that you guys come here. How was the book? This is a book that has a lot of strengths in both the writing and the art. I'd first like to discuss the fact that Mark Waid makes sure to follow a really recognizable teen drama plot. I say that because Mark Waid doesn't step up to the plate with anything out of this world like Afterlife with Archie does, like Archie vs. Predator does, or like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina does. He doesn't try to reinvent the teen drama and Archie format, and I feel like that's really important for keeping up with consistency for this image that Archie has built over a long period of years. The book basically opens with us learning about Archie, learning about Riverdale, learning about the inhabitants and him and Betty's relationship, and then learning, hey, things didn't go so well, they've broken up at the start of this book. We then follow people's reaction to their breakup and various plans to get them back together, while also examining how Betty and Archie themselves feel after this breakup. If that sounds like any episode of Degrassi or any teen movie that you've seen, that's because this is a really basic format, and that's not a bad thing. Teen drama has evolved into its own type of genre at this point, and a story like this is basically the bread and butter. This is like the Superman fighting Lex Luthor of Archie Comics. It's a basic story, but at the same time, it gives us all the things that we both want and expect. And the reason that I think that this is so very good is that coming into a #1, you have to appease the people that have been reading Archie for 75 years, maybe, I don't know, some 90-year-old still reading Archie. And you have to appease the people coming into Archie fresh off the boat. That's a huge gap of knowledge that you have to make sure is bridged. And setting up a really basic, easy-to-follow teen story that everyone is familiar with is the best way of doing that. If Waid had done some elaborate plot that requires knowledge of the previous Archie universe, of course people coming into the book brand new wouldn't know what was going on and would probably have a negative opinion of it. At the same time, he manages to present this rather generic plot in a way that's not necessarily that handholdy, so the people that have been reading Archie forever won't be upset by him insulting their intelligence. It's a good middle ground, and something like that is so important for a reboot of such a long franchise. Another one of the strengths of Waid's writing in this book is that he manages to introduce the characters quickly, efficiently, and in a way that's both appeasing to new audiences and to old audiences. He states some pretty basic things that you need to know about the character in order to get engaged in the story, but he doesn't dwell on it too long and risk it being insulting to the previous Archie readers. For instance, he talks about Raj being a wannabe filmmaker, he talks about Dilton being the smart one, and Trevor's sister being on American Idol. He does so all in the course of Archie introducing himself and their high school as a whole. This makes these introductions feel natural and flow really well. And he does the same thing with Betty and her group of friends, as well as with Jughead. And he introduces the fact that Veronica Lodge is moving to town in a rather natural, flowing manner that doesn't feel insulting to any one party. Wade also manages a lot of little tricks that build up individual characters, as well as the world as a whole. There's one particular instance that I absolutely adore, which is Archie talking about the fact that Betty smells like flowers and motor oil. That might seem like a rather weird and benign comment that doesn't add a lot to her character, but believe me, it speaks volumes for how Archie views his ex-girlfriend, and also tells us a lot about Betty as an individual character. It's a trick that Neil Gaiman used in Sandman as well when he was introducing the Endless. Tiny details that might seem insignificant tell us more about the character than if Archie had said she likes to fix cars. Which brings me to my next point. Wade manages to make these characters fit within their predefined Archie shells, these characters that we've known for years and years and years. We know how they act, we know their interests and likes. Wade manages to combine those preconceived notions that we have of the characters, while still giving them his own individual twist that makes them better acclimated for his story and in this setting. Which is once again one of the best ways to go about doing a reboot that I've ever seen. Wade also manages to make sure that this takes place in a modern age with modern teenagers. Phones are abundant, the internet clearly exists, Twitter is a big thing in these people's lives. That doesn't sound necessarily that important, but for a book that's clearly trying to engage a teenage audience to generate sales, that's a very key thing that needs to happen. If these characters were stuck in a 50s or 60s Archie mindset, saying things like golly gee, that would be completely unacceptable to today's youth. At the same time, though, Wade manages to make these teenagers not look like cookie-cutter teenagers that you'd see on any trashy TV show on Disney Channel. These characters have sparks of individuality that makes them truly likable, both as people and as the beloved Archie characters that you've grown to know. Another pro is some of the tools that Wade uses to get us interested in what's going on in the comic. Betty and Archie are broken up before the comic even starts. You might be thinking, well, that's it. Game over. Why would I care about this relationship that's clearly failed? Wade teases us, however, by mentioning this incident that happened that caused them to break up, that he doesn't tell us, that Archie doesn't tell anyone else, that Betty doesn't tell anyone else, that Jughead doesn't tell anyone else, labeling it the lipstick incident. This is something that's brought up again and again and again over the course of this one short issue. It keeps us intrigued. We want to know what the lipstick incident was. Sure, it's kind of a cheap tactic to get us interested, but for an issue number 1, I've got no problem with them using all the cheap tricks to keep me interested. Wade also has another stroke of genius by only teasing Veronica in this issue. Veronica doesn't show up at the end and ruin everyone's day, or become immediately enamored with Archie. Veronica is teased, pushed off to the distance. She's probably going to show up in issue 2, but I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't. This book is clearly on a slow burn, and I think that it's doing a lot of wonders for the pacing and the character development. But even with all those strengths, the writing in Archie number 1 is far from flawless. One of my biggest pet peeves with the book was that the introduction of Jughead was pretty unceremonious and didn't do a good job of painting the rather deep character that Jughead has grown to be in the comics. For some of the more minor characters like Trevor or Shayla, I have no problem with them only getting a bit of a gloss over at their introduction. But for a character like Jughead to have a rather weak introduction where characters are seen bribing him with food and he says no and stays loyal to Archie, I feel like that's only giving us the most basic info that we have on Jughead. Anyone who's heard of Archie knows that Jughead loves food, and anyone with a slight bit of knowledge on Archie knows that Jughead is fiercely loyal to his friends and doesn't have the highest respect for women. I'm not saying that Jughead needed as long of an introduction as Betty and Archie got, but I do think that it needed more than people bribing him with food to tell him about the lipstick incident. Also, some pretty cringe-worthy Twitter plugging at the very end of this comic that came across as kind of heavy-handed and made Mark Waid feel just a bit out of touch. Now let's move on to one of my favorite parts of the book, which is Fiona Staples' art. So clearly Archie Comics didn't use the house style for this book. This wouldn't be the first time. Franco Francavilla is doing crazy things with art over at Afterlife with Archie. But for the main series reboot, they took a rather large risk with having Fiona Staples using her art style for this book. Basically, she had to step up to bat and knock it out of the park, or old Archie fans would be offended. Luckily, Staples manages to do that and more with this book. The characters are vibrant and expressive, which is so important for a slice-of-life book like this that's driven purely by character interaction and drama. The high school scenes are actually reminiscent of a modern high school. The hallways have this sort of crowdedness to them that tells us, hey, these characters that we're focusing on, they are a smaller part of a larger universe. And Staples manages to give all of these characters a very modern makeover. Betty looks more modern. Shayla and Maria, they look like they could exist today. Archie, of course, looks more modern. Even Jughead's silly outfit kind of got a more modern spin. Really, the only person that didn't get a more modern spin is Reggie. And I think Reggie's dressing like a greaser just because Reggie's a huge idiot. Staples manages to make these characters acceptable for all comers. Staples also managed to break one of my preconceived notions. which was that there wasn't going to be anything super impressive about the paneling in this book. It's a slice-of-life comic. It's not really the place for exciting paneling. But Staples proved me wrong. There's this scene where Archie's playing a concert for everyone at the dance, and she manages to use the paneling to make it look so exciting. By placing panels here, there, helter-skelter, it adds energy to the scene and makes it feel like we're actually at a rock concert. There are really no moments in this book where the art let me down. Huge props go to the colorists too, Andres Szymanowicz and Jen Vaughn. They really managed to bring Staples' work right off the page. Characters have rich, soft, believable skin tones. Hair and fabric look realistic enough to exist on our world. And in that same dance scene, they managed to really pack in the pinks and the blues, upping the exciting feeling even more. No stretch to say that the art wouldn't be the same without those two on coloring. I hope that they stick around for the entire series. With all the praise I give the art though, there's a couple instances that might throw you off your game if you're not ready for them. Fiona Staples has a habit of giving characters sort of protruding bottom lips when they're making certain facial expressions. It brings the expressions more to life, makes them cartoonier and larger, but anatomically speaking, obviously it might throw you off. Those are stylistic things with Fiona Staples though. If you like Staples and you know what you're in for, it probably won't throw you off your game too much. And altogether, the art brings this book to the next level. Archie #1 is an ideal reboot, and I think companies should take note. It manages to treat the old material in a respectful way, treat the old readers in a respectful way, but still has plenty of tricks to draw on the new crowd. It's an exciting prospect, giving a company like Archie that's been knocking it out of the park lately another avenue to do so. I'm sure at this point, I don't even have to say it. I'm giving Archie #1 a buy it. This book deserves our support. Archie Comics wants to do a whole slew of other books in the same vein as the old books with this universe, and they clearly need our support to do so, especially after that failed Kickstarter project. Archie #1 is on shelves now. Go out and buy it. Don't wait for the trade on this one. You're going to want to keep up with the adventures of Archie and the gang every week, just like people used to do at the grocery store. I'm so excited for that feeling. I've never experienced it in all of comics, and with this reboot, Archie Comics is letting me get on that Archie bandwagon. That being said, in all fairness, if you're not a fan of teen drama, or really teen hijinks in any regard, don't go out and buy Archie #1. It's not going to be for you. So that's all we have time for this week, true believers. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on all the social media in the description below. Leave a comment. Do you think this book's worth buy it, borrow it, skip it? Are you excited that they rebooted this Archie universe? Do you think it's a bad idea? Do you think it'll live up to Afterlife with Archie, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina? Let me know below. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And if you have a request for what I should review next, leave that below too, and I'll get around to it real quick for you. But until next time, we'll see you later, true believers.